Welcome to this final component of the management course focused on our own professional development. This semester, we will be focusing on a recently published book titled Gold in Your Backyard, Lessons in Life Leadership and the Power of a Dream, written by Ron Rubin. Ron Rubin is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, mentor, and he created the program Trained for Saving Lives, which has trained thousands of employees at hundreds of wineries in Sonoma and Napa and ensured that these wineries are equipped with automated external defibrillators to save people's lives in case of a cardiac-related emergency. This book is organized in 7 parts, which are Wisdom and Spirit, Innovate, Educate, Inspire, Listen and Learn, Honor and Share, Be Smart About Money, When Trouble Comes, and For the Greater Good. Today, we will cover the first part of the book, which includes 4 chapters. This first section starts with a quote by Steve Jobs that says that the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So the first chapter of this section is titled Find a Mentor. Ron's book starts with a reflection on the 3 mentors that had the strongest influence on his mindset and approach to business and life. The mentor that had the strongest influence on Ron was his dad, Ron Rubin. Ron's dad grew up during the Great Depression of the 1930s, which was followed by World War II. Ron believes that the deep levels of unemployment and the profound misery his dad witnessed during his upbringing led his dad to place great emphasis on working hard to provide financial security and taking care of family and the employees. The biggest lesson that he learned from his dad was that he should avoid debt at all costs. No debt, no creditors at your throat. The second mentor that had a big impact on Ron's life was Frank Furres Jr. Frank was the sales manager at the liquor distributorship. Frank taught Ron that it doesn't matter if you have the best technology, the best product, or the best trucks, the best facilities, the best intellectual property. If you don't know how to sell, if you don't understand your customer segment, your market, if you don't understand pricing, then everything else is practically irrelevant. What leads to success in business is the ability to sell. The third mentor that had a big impact in Ron's life was Julian Beneski. Julian and Ron's dad launched the liquor distributorship in the 1950s as partners, each with 50% ownership. In 1972, Julian fulfilled his promise to Ron's dad to sell back to him his 50% equity ownership so that Ron could take his place as a second partner in the distributorship. Julian remained on the board of directors. So there were 3 people on the board of directors: Ron's dad, Ron, and Julian. What Ron learned from Julian was that when you're facing a big difficulty, a big challenge, a big decision, deep in your heart, you always know the answer. That's why it's important to trust our intuition, trust ourselves, trust our heart. In a nutshell, what Ron learned from his mentors was trust yourself, believe in yourself, and never stop learning. Ron suggests to us that we should find our own mentors and advisors, men and women that we can trust to share their wisdom and help guide us along the way. That's the best foundation we can possibly have. So ask yourself, who are the members of your board of directors? Who are your mentors? That's an important question for all of us. The second chapter of this section of the book is titled Read. Ron believes that education is a lifelong endeavor and a continuous improvement approach is the key to success and to living a fulfilled life. Ron set a goal for himself to read 1 book every week, and throughout his life, he's read hundreds of books. He's particularly interested in books about creators and entrepreneurs because he loves to learn how they brought their vision into reality. Now, can you imagine reading 52 books a year? Think about how much it would stimulate our mind and the number of different perspectives that we would familiarize ourselves with just by reading such a large number of books. Ron also reads 4 or 5 newspapers and magazines to find wisdom, guidance, and essential life lessons. Ron emphasizes in this chapter Nick Saban's "How Good Do You Want to Be?" a champion's tips on how to lead and succeed in work and in life. And Sally Jenkins's "The Right Call: What Sports Can Teach Us About Work and Life." First, Ron tells us that Nick Saban's "How Good Do You Want to Be" teaches us what it takes to succeed in business, in sports, in coaching, in leadership, and whatever it is that we set out to do. Saban's message, according to Ron, is that to reach the top in whatever we set out to do, we have to have a special passion, a special intensity, a special focus that we bring to the task that we're performing. And always, we need to have an iron-like commitment to continuous learning and continuous improvement and growth. And when trouble comes and we suffer the inevitable setbacks and hardships that life will throw in our path, we don't quit ever. In fact, champions emerge or re-emerge from the difficulties stronger and better positioned for success than before they experienced the setback. Building on Martin Luther King's speech, Saban tells us that if we want to be a street sweeper, we should aim to be the best street sweeper there has ever been. Like Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, says Saban. Remember, Michelangelo thought that he never finished painting the Sistine Chapel. So he always thought there was room for improvement, that it was a lifelong project. Applying this principle to the management course, we should challenge ourselves to become the best students and practitioners of management that we can be. The second book that Ron emphasizes in this chapter is Sally Jenkins' The Right Call: What Sports Can Teach Us About Work and Life. Sally Jenkins is a Washington Post reporter, and over her career, she has covered some of the greatest athletes in the world. In this book, she focuses on athletes in 8 different sports. The message of her book is that the best leaders who led their teams to win championships developed a process and a path to help them reach the top. And there's some commonalities in the method they follow, which she calls the path to greatness, which has 7 stepping stones, which are conditioning, which means not just strength, but also enhancing our cognitive function, our ability to pay attention, to focus, and our executive function for planning, organizing, and being intentional about improvement and maintaining sharpness, especially under situations of stress. For example, Bob Iger starts his day with 45 minutes of cardiovascular exercise. Practice is the effort to become skilled in a particular craft. Sally provides the example of Stephen Curry. When she shook Stephen's hand, she was surprised to find out it was covered with calluses, because Curry shoots thousands of shots every week as practice to become more proficient at shooting basketball. The third stepping stone is candor, which means players that lead their teams to win championships are not only brutally honest with their teammates, but they also provide suggestions on how these weaknesses or issues could be addressed and how their game can improve. So the key here is not to just criticize, but also criticize with feedback and suggestions for improvement. Failure is another stepping stone. Sally talks about a spirit of inquiry amongst the greatest players like Tom Brady, where they use setbacks as an opportunity to learn what not to do so they don't repeat the same mistakes in the future. Intention means when we practice, we don't just practice what we do best, we actually focus on our weaknesses and shortcomings. There's an objective for every practice session, and we have to have a measurable outcome of what success in that practice would look like. Finally, the culture of a team, of an organization is very, very important, because if other team members see other team members being thrown under the bus or not treated fairly, then the dedication and the intensity that they bring to the game will suffer along with team morale and cohesiveness. So Ron concludes this chapter by saying that Nick Saban, with his book, had shown us the discipline, commitment, and resilience, and above all, the spirit that it takes to become a champion. What's that spirit? It's about trying to be the best at your craft and having a special level of intensity that you bring to every situation. Sally Jenkins showed us a clear element by element process to build a winning team and carry it down the road to greatness. And with that, we move on to the third chapter, which is titled Take Risks. In this chapter, Ron describes instances in which he took risks during his professional trajectory. The first example is when he joined his dad's distributorship after graduating college. The distributorship operated in 34 counties. Ron saw an opportunity to expand to 8 more counties and reach an additional 1.5 million potential customers. This seemed risky, and his dad was against it, but being that the board of directors of the distributorship had 3 members, Julian was the 3rd member along with Ron's dad and Ron. When Ron called for a vote, he was surprised to see that Julian sided with him, and that led to the distributorship taking the risk of expanding. Taking this risk paid off for the distributorship, as it turned out to be the key to the long-term sustainability of the company, because being able to capture market share allowed the distributorship to sustain itself for the next few decades. The second example of taking risks is when Ron's distributorship was presented with the opportunity to grow the company by distributing bottled waters in the 1980s. Now, at this point in time, bottled water was not a mass consumer product like it is today, and the market was mostly made up of sales of French bottled waters like Evian and Perrier, bought mainly by affluent consumers. When Ron became aware that a company named Clearly Canadian produced bottled flavored sparkling water, he not only became a distributor for this company, but he actually invested in the company. This initiative to distribute Clearly Canadian's flavored sparkling waters was so successful that 3 years later, in 1992, Ron's distributorship has sold over 3 million cases, not 3 million bottles, but 3 million cases of Clearly Canadian's flavored sparkling waters. This represented not only a generous infusion of cash and profit for the distributorship, but also represented a risk that was successfully overcome and an opportunity that was not passed on. The third risk that Ron describes in this chapter is after he learned about a book titled The Republic of Tea, How an Idea Becomes a Business, written by Mel and Patricia Ziegler, along with their friend Bill Rosenwein. Ron was fascinated by the Republic of Tea and the brand and organizational culture that the founders crafted as they shared faxes with each other describing what the positioning of the brand would be and what the company's philosophy and culture could look like. As some of you may know, Mel and Patricia Ziegler founded the Banana Republic in 1978. When Mel and Patricia worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, Mel was a reporter, Patricia was an illustrator. While they were on assignment in Australia, Mel bought a war surplus British Burma jacket, and he was really impressed with the quality of the fabric and the design of the jacket. So Mel and Patricia asked themselves, why not sell clothes like this back home in San Francisco? So they went to a jobber who's sort of a junk dealer and bought the jobber's entire inventory of Spanish Civil War Army shirts, which were a total of 500 shirts, and they bought them at $1.50. They then went to the Marine City Sunday flea market and sold them for $6.50 each. That Sunday, they only sold 5 shirts. The next Sunday, they priced it at twice as much, at $12.95 each. And they sold over 100 of these shirts that day. And right then and there, the Banana Republic business was born. They rented the first floor of a building in Mill City and created their first store. Their travel and safari sales catalog also became extremely popular. In 1983, they sold the Banana Republic to the Gap. And now the Banana Republic is one of the 4 big brands of the Gap, which is a $10 billion company. Now here's a photo of their first store in Mill Valley, California. And this is Mel and Patricia Ziegler in their first store. You can see in the front of the store the words Travel and Safari Clothing, which became the name of their catalog, which became a huge sensation at the time. Ron was fascinated by the book, which is a transcription of the faxes that were the correspondence between the founders as they discussed the culture of excitement and passion that they would instill in this new venture. When Ron heard that Mel, Bill, and Patricia needed someone with experience in beverage distribution, he thought, who better than me for this role? And he joined their venture. 22 months later, after joining their venture, he bought out the entire company. Now, that was a massive risk because remember, the biggest lesson that Ron's dad had taught him was no debt, no creditors at your throat. And yet, in order to buy the Republic of Tea, Ron had to take on quite a bit of debt. So that was a very big risk that also turned out to be a huge business success. Now, I highly encourage all of us to at least glance through the book, The Republic of Tea, How an Idea Becomes a Business, because it shows us how, if we take the time to craft new venture ideas and carefully think through them, they can eventually become a successful business, just like the Republic of Tea is today. I also inserted a screenshot of one of the faxes sent between the founders as they envisioned the different elements of the new venture. This one describes, for example, their different beverages and tea, hot tea, iced tea, and the different subtypes of hot and cold tea that they would have. Seeing how someone's idea evolved into a more complete vision and after enough deliberation and careful planning became a successful business venture helps us believe in our own dreams and how they can materialize. Now, the 4th chapter is the last chapter of this section of the book. It is titled Live Your Dream. It is in this chapter that we learn how Ron's life experience taught him the need to have a sense of urgency in everything we do and live the best life that we can. In this chapter, Ron tells us that in his early 20s, he was studying viticulture and winemaking at UC Davis. And during his free time, he would drive around and see the vineyards and wineries in the surrounding area. It was during this time that his life dream to grow his own grapes, make his own wine, and have his own winery was born. Now, fast forward to the age of 60 years old. Ron was happily married, had raised 2 children, and was managing the Republic of Tea. But he had not yet fulfilled his dream of owning his own winery. It was at this time that Ron had a close encounter with death as a result of a ventricular tachycardia, which required emergency heart surgery. This happened in California, and he had to be transported to the Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis. Ron tells us how he remembers laying in his hospital bed, agonizing about what he had achieved in life and what he had failed to achieve, and feeling absolutely horrible about the pain that his family would feel in his absence. And that's when he concluded that our time on this planet is limited and there is no certainty of what will happen tomorrow or even later today. So we must seize the day, we must build our dreams, and we must do it now. We must have the sense of urgency about accomplishing the goals and objectives we have. Here's where Ron lays out the argument for why the book is titled Gold in Your Backyard. Ron tells us that when we look back at our lives, it won't be the number of cases sold, it won't be the number of professional accomplishments we have attained, it won't be the amount of money we have made or saved that will bring the greatest satisfaction. Instead, the deepest satisfactions we will find will come from our family, our spouses and children, and those who shared their love and supported our dreams. And it will come from our friends and coworkers, from those who followed our lead, who joined our causes, and who stood faithfully beside us in the best of times and also the worst. Yes, that's where the true gold is, right in your backyard, argues Ron. And that's a very powerful message because we're not looking for literal material gold or wealth. True wealth is measured in the quality of the relationship that we have with our family members and our colleagues, how we pursued our dreams and passionately led our teams. The epilogue of this story is that after searching for a property in California for a couple of years, Ron's family eventually settled on a beautiful estate in Sebastopol, California, where they established the River Road Family Vineyards and Winery, which is shown in the video on this slide. In the next presentation, we will cover the second part of the book, which is titled Innovate, Educate, and Inspire.